forget to like and subscribe.
And hit the notification bell
so we can go to college and get more knowledge.
Special drawing rights, or SDRs, play an important role in providing liquidity to the global economic system. SDRs were created by the IMF in 1969 to supplement the official reserves of its member countries. SDRs aren't a currency, and they're not claims on the IMF. But they are an international reserve asset that can be converted into reserve currencies with the help of other member countries. This way, IMF members have access to unconditional liquidity. SDRs are normally distributed among members through a process called a general allocation, a decision that requires approval by the IMF Board of Governors with at least 85% of the total voting power. There have been 4 so far in the history of the IMF. In a general allocation, the IMF distributes SDRs to member countries in proportion to their quota shares at the IMF, reflecting their relative economic standing in the world economy. Only certain parties can hold SDRs: the IMF, its member countries, and certain prescribed holders, such as regional central banks, intergovernmental monetary institutions, and some development banks. The value of the SDR is updated daily and defined by a basket of major currencies used in the world's most important trading and financial systems: the US dollar, the euro, the Chinese renminbi, the Japanese yen, and the UK pound sterling. The SDR's interest rate is adjusted weekly based on the short-term interest rate of government securities of the currencies in the SDR basket. How do SDRs help provide liquidity to the global economic system? Members can exchange SDRs for freely usable currencies held by other members. This brings down their SDR holdings, but provides them with the currency to either help meet balance of payment needs or add to their own reserves. Members can also use their SDRs to pay for IMF loans or quota increases. Members with strong external positions sometimes use their SDR holdings to contribute to the financing of low-income countries by lending to the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. Members can hold on to their allocated SDRs to increase their international reserve buffer. They earn interest on their holdings of SDRs and pay interest on their cumulative allocations at the same SDR interest rate. This means that the interest earned and charged cancel out so long as SDR holdings are equal to their allocated SDRs. So, holding on to the allocation itself has no cost for the members. If a member exchanges its SDRs for freely usable currencies, its SDR holdings and the interest earned on those holdings will fall. If the holding falls below the cumulative allocation, the member has to pay interest on the shortfall. Likewise, if a member provides freely usable currencies in exchange for extra SDRs, it gets paid interest on the surplus of SDR holdings. Most exchanges of SDRs for currency take place through voluntary trading arrangements, or VTAs. Under these arrangements, facilitated by the IMF, members volunteer to buy or sell SDRs. In the rare and unlikely event that a transaction doesn't go through a VTA, the IMF can call on members with strong external positions to buy SDRs from members with a balance of payment need. The IMF helps members make the best use of their SDRs by providing advice on macroeconomic policy, as well as transparency and accountability measures. The IMF's guiding principle is that any use of SDRs should be consistent with macroeconomic sustainability, but it also provides space for a response for crises, such as the pandemic. The use of SDRs should not delay changes to macroeconomic policies, reforms, or debt restructurings where needed. In August 2021, the IMF's Board of Governors adopted the largest ever general allocation of SDRs, equivalent to $650 billion. This allocation among 190 member countries was adopted to help meet the long-term global need to supplement reserve assets. Another important objective was to help build confidence and send a powerful signal of a cooperative, multilateral response to the COVID-19 crisis, including providing more scope for spending on crisis response in liquidity-constrained emerging market and developing economies. Learn more about SDRs at imf.org/SDR.
Welcome back in the place to be with the CBDC Assets Group. Thank you for being a part of the group. Okay, I'm not going to talk you guys' head off. If you've watched the video this far, you're already interested in SDR, special drawing rights, and the potential of being used for international reserve currency. Now, what I want to show you here, the next video is very interesting. Not this little clip of the George Gammon takeover. I just wanted to give some insight because I show these people and I'm trying to teach people. So at the same time, I want you to know who they are. Anybody who's followed anything about investing and finance knows who Rich Dad Robert Kiyosaki is. Watch this. 20 seconds of this, and then we're going to get into this George Gammon video that'll blow your mind. Watch it all the way till the end. That's the most important part. I know everybody says that. I'm being honest. This one's good. See you guys on the next one.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, hello, hello. My name is Robert Kiyosaki. This is the Rich Dad Radio Show where we talk about the good news and bad news about money. I'm here with my good friend, George Gammon.
Hi, this is George Gammon of the Rebel Capitalist Show, and it's going to be an interesting show because we're now screwed up. So there's a lot been happening, and I think that's the one there has to be a God somewhere, because I've respected George for so many years, and now
Robert.
He lives next door. I mean, through that wall is George's office because we got rid of our CEO, which is a good thing. Replaced it with George. So I was saying the other day, I said, it's like having God upstairs. Because when I need a question, I just call George. I just come upstairs. So George is upstairs. He's the God of macro.
Yeah.
And now we're going to be broadcasting from our little Rich Dad office, like it's right next door.
So then the next question becomes, well, if Klaus doesn't like Bitcoin, if he doesn't like gold, what does he like? A better option is the IMF's special drawing right, or SDR, which should become the world's principal reserve asset. So then he goes on to talk about some of the potential roadblocks for the SDR. Then he talks about how cryptocurrencies may show us how the SDR could dominate the globe. But the advent of cryptocurrencies may offer another way. The private sector can work directly with central banks to create a digital SDR to use as a unit of account and a store of value. I don't know how the private sector would do that. I do know how the central bank and the IMF and the World Economic Forum would do that, though. He's calling this the ESDR, and it would, in a sense, be the quintessential reserve asset because it would be fully backed by reserve currencies in the IMF determined ratio. So regardless of who creates it, he points out that the IMF would control it. And I want to point out lastly that Klaus finishes the article, or again, I'm not sure if Klaus wrote this, but I think everything's approved by him. The rise of cryptocurrencies has created a unique opportunity. And if you watched my videos on the Great Reset agenda, you'll know that Klaus always refers to the cerveza sickness as a quote-unquote great opportunity. It seems like any event that's happening around the world is an opportunity for him to further his agenda, which in this case is a digital SDR. So it's obvious the global elite want to replace the dollar, Bitcoin, and gold with the digital SDR. But now let's connect the dots to understand what that system would look like and how they might get there. This is the dollar system we talked about earlier. Editor, help me out and let's show the folks at home what the SDR system would look like. Boom, the magic of editing. Pretty cool, huh? But what's not cool is now at the top of the food chain, the top of the totem pole, is the IMF, Klaus, and Mr. Bigglesworth. And I think what you're going to see in 2021 and beyond are more and more negative PR campaigns and comments from the politicians, from maybe Janet Yellen, from the IMF, the World Economic Forum. They're going to make gold out to be a barbarous relic that cannot be used, and Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency as something that is only used by villains, criminals, drug dealers, terrorists, and therefore it is unfit for public use. The only option is going to be a centralized approach. And I think it'll start with the central bank digital currencies, but then transition into a more global replacement for the Eurodollar system, which, like I said earlier, is this SDR network. So how does it work? Very similar to what we saw before with the dollar network. The IMF would issue these SDRs or SDR loans, which they're pretty much doing already. And the corporations would borrow in SDRs. They would transact back and forth from one another with SDRs. So the central bank's balance sheets, their assets would go from dollars, SDRs. The corporation, their assets, liabilities would also make the switch, while at the same time, the currencies would stay the same. I think each country's real economy would still transact in their local currency, but the local currency would switch from its current form to a central bank digital currency. So the IMF would be at the top controlling the entire global monetary system. And you know what Rothschild said about money? Give me control of the money, and I care not who writes the laws. So this system is the complete opposite in many ways of the current system. Instead of being decentralized, it is completely centralized. There are no profit and loss. Therefore, they can lend based on a social score or whatever objectives they have. There is no competition. You have absolutely no choice. Therefore, you have no privacy either. But right about now, your friend and family member Fred is probably watching this video and saying, George, that is crazy talk. You libertarian tinfoil hatters, there's no way any central bank or country would ever adopt the SDR over the dollar. Well, let's go ahead and answer that question for your friend and family member Fred. It starts by trying to figure out how a central planner, group, IMF, World Organization, fill in the blank, would make the central banks themselves powerless. The only thing that I know of that would create that environment is hyperinflation or significant inflation. We can look at the United States as an example. If we had 10, 20, 30% consumer price inflation, the Fed would be impotent. They would have no tools at their disposal because anything they do, dropping interest rates, creating more bank reserves, trying to monetize government debt, would exacerbate the problem of inflation. The inflation would get worse and worse and worse. The central bank, in this case the Fed's hands, would be tied. They would be powerless. So then the next question becomes, how do we envision a scenario where we would have global hyperinflation, a straight devaluation of the major currencies in the world? Well, first, what you would need is for every country to shut down their economy. Maybe some type of lockdown. And I don't know what would make them do it, but if this actually happened in the world, or if it continues to happen in the world, and the central banks continue to take their balance sheet to infinity and beyond, printing more and more currency units, you very well could see a significant global inflation. I'm not saying hyperinflation again, no certainties, only probabilities. But this could give Klaus the opportunity he needs to introduce the digital SDR.